Hello and welcome to edition 111 of the Low Code Cafe for September 28th, 2022. Today we're going to talk about APIs as a data source, and we hope that that will be informative to you. Before we jump into it, let me introduce myself. My name is Dale Warner. I'm head of support for Plantin-App. Today we'll talk a little bit about some things that are going on. Well, let's just say the Low Code Cafe, they introduced the event. This is an event we hold weekly for our team and for the community. It's one where we do updates and demos and hands-on coding, which is the biggest part of our event, a technical discussion. We'll also share some tips and tricks from our team and the community. We record all these episodes. They're all out on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Plantin-App, and you can use that QR code or go to the links that we post here in a minute. But lots of very good content, and we're working behind the scenes to make it even more searchable for you. So hopefully that'll be something we can show off in the next month or so. But today's agenda, I'll be sharing some hotfixes and tips from the trenches, and then moving right on to our hands-on low-code development, the API data sources. We have a special programming note. The Low Code Cafe will not be held next week, October the 5th, and we'll have a special episode coming October the 12th. It's not being held because we're all getting together in Romania for a team building exercise. And so the special episode is you'll have us all together again for the first time. So we don't know the topic, but we'll be celebrating doing it together. The Campfire meeting also will not be held for the same reason on October the 7th. So that's the Friday meeting. We'll talk about that in a second. So in our From the Trenches segment today, we'll first announce a few hotfixes. In our past release, version 1.21, we have one hotfix this week. It is if you use the number field type in our form builder, there's now a minimum value. We've previously supported having a maximum value, but now you can specify a minimum value that will be validated. So that might assist you if you use that field type. And that same hotfix will be coming out in the next week or so for the same for our current version 1.22. In 1.22 this week, we've released 5 hotfixes, and some of these are very cosmetic. We've changed the help text for a couple of things, so the register with email action had some confusing help text, as did some help text with the action form file manager. So just working to document and clean up so that when you actually get using those products, that especially for the first time, that you understand what's available to you. A couple that are important, I think, that I've highlighted here. We've had an issue with connected forms not working in Bootstrap 5. This is where you have 2 different forms on the same page and you want to submit them all at once. So you use this connected form feature. Wasn't working, and so now we've released a hotfix to that. And then there's another one that is probably a use case that doesn't apply to you, but if you're trying to put tokens into your listing column formatters, they were being evaluated as you submitted instead of being evaluated at the time the listing was shown. So we've fixed that very minor problem. One thing that came out in 5.22 or 1.22 of our product is, and I'll just explain, I don't want to be confusing on that. This is actually should read in 1.22 of our product. Our product consists of a number of modules, and in the listing, in our individual modules are numbered with 5s, and the product as a whole is numbered with 1s. So in our current version of the module is now this read all entity now returns a list. And for anybody that's used this, I think this is just a very a very easy simplification. If you have an entity, for example, called books, and so if we were to look at entities, I have an entity here called books, and it has things like the title of the book and the date published and things like that. So we've got, if we wanted to use an action to read all the books and do something with them, this workflow would do that. You could use, the action to read all is there. And so let me find my example workflow where I was going to show that action. So you would add an action called read all books. Previously, the output of this, you would give it an output token name, and it's kind of hard to see in the fine print there, but it would create the JSON, would return JSON that is all of the book data, and you could process that. And most of the time, people would use this you would get the JSON and turn right around and turn it into a list so that you could iterate through it. So we've made a very simple change here. Now, in addition to returning JSON, so it's not going to break anything you already have, but now whatever the output token is also already a list that you can use. So in this case, we have output token of the books. And in my next action, I can just work directly on an execute actions for each list entry and feed it the list name, the books. And so now there's not an intermediate step necessary to turn that JSON into a list. It's a simple change, but I think it makes a lot of sense if you're ever using the read all action. So hopefully that will be of use to you at some point. So let's see. I mentioned Campfire. We encourage you to engage in Campfire. This is an event that we hold for the community, and it is in a meeting format this same hour every Friday, except Friday the 7th. And so it's a discussion hosted by someone here at Plant and App, oftentimes me, but this week to come, it's going to be hosted by Patrick. And it's just an opportunity for you to engage with us. Sometimes it's, how do I do this? Sometimes it's, here's a problem I'm having. Anybody have suggestions? We often see solutions come right out of the meeting, or at least good pointers on what's next. So if you want to go deeper into Plant and App and have a discussion, this is a great way to do it. I don't have any special links for this episode, but I will put them on the clipboard anyway. And last week we had a report that you couldn't copy off the clipboard. I hope you'll be able to copy off of it. And someone let me know if you're able to copy off of it, because that was it's a Zoom setting we're having a little trouble with. We made some changes. Hopefully it's better. So this will give you the opportunity to register for the low-code Campfire, get to our recordings, get to our community portal. In the community portal is a great place to post if you have questions. And in that forum, you can post questions, get an answer both from us and from the user base at large. And so we see a lot of questions get answered there, and that's great. Thank you for those that help in that, by the way. And also on that community portal, there's an opportunity to do live help. We run several live help sessions every week. You can sign up and get some one-on-one time with a member of our team. And that's a free service. Then there's this webinar feedback form, and we'd love to hear any suggestions you have on making this webinar better, or any topic you would like us to consider presenting. Okay, so now we can move on to the meat of what we said we were going to do today, the technical part, APIs as a data source. This is not going to be a comprehensive solution, but rather just demonstrating parts and pieces of how you can use API endpoints as a data source. So what we'll do in big terms today, we're going to create an entity just to use as data, and then we'll consume it in a different way. So, and we might want to make some changes to that. When you create an entity, it automatically creates endpoints for you. So we could use the default endpoints that are created, but we can also create our own, which might have a lower security threshold depending on what we need. And so we'll talk about it. It's not recommended to modify these, to modify the ones that the system creates automatically, but rather create your own copy and do what you need to do. So we'll do that, remove some security limitations, and provide the security necessary to read the data. So that's one part. And then we'll talk about using API endpoints. You can use them at listings. You can use them as item data sources in a couple of different ways. So that's where we're going. And so we'll dig into that. I have it here. I have an empty system, or rather a system that doesn't have much into it. And so we'll go ahead and create an entity. So the entity, we're gonna be talking about products today, just kind of a general term. It'll have an item ID number, a name, maybe a price. I don't know. Let's see what we get into. So we go to entities, create this as new. We can give it a namespace, but we're just going to accept the default. And so we'll do product and then the plural products. We are going to let this remain on the main page, and we'll just go at a couple of properties. So this is going to be the title, the description, and let's say we have a cost. Doesn't matter. And for our display name, the one that's going to be hyperlinked for us automatically, we're going to choose, where is it? The title. And we'll pick up a few of these custom property settings. So let's see, I didn't intend to make cost required or searchable, so we'll turn those off, but we'll make description searchable. We don't really have anything. We'll make everything sortable. Nope, nothing that really is going to need filtering. And we're going to accept the default security permissions. So this is going to give us just access to, let's see, actually, I am going to make it where all users can view this data, and that'll be useful. Okay. So we'll save that and move on. And I realized already that I think I want to do a little bit more with security. You want to make it where users can also view everything, and maybe users can add products and edit their own products.
You missed the checkbox there on the add products.
Thank you, sir. Someone's paying attention. All right. So that's the creation of an entity. We'll go and let it generate. And so it generates a couple of things for us that we can see. First of all, if we look at, we find products here, we can view that page in a new tab. And so we can see, and we'll enter a few products. So we have the ability to do new. And so this is a, we'll do some apparel today. If I wanted to get fancy, I would, we could have figured out how to do a picture, but that's not the topic for today. So we'll do sweatshirts. We're probably also going to do something like that. And we can edit. we could go as far as we wanted to with this. Maybe if we get inspired, we'll come back, but at least we have some basic information. Okay, so just this gives us some basic data. In addition to Plant an App automatically creating the ability to do new, to edit, to delete, to list out the information, to be able to sort on it, there's lots of capability that's automatically generated for us. But in addition, and I guess while I'm reviewing all those things, there's also this drill down. Remember, we said we can hyperlink one and you can click on it. And so it generates this detail page that has all of the item information on it. So we can see the title, the description, the cost, all this. So lots of built-in capability created for you. One of the things that we don't often think about is that it also creates APIs for us, API endpoints. And so if we search this when it loads, there are a number of endpoints that are created automatically. So one is a group of endpoints that I'll open up. There is the ability to create a new product. The get will return a particular product. Put will be able to update the information of a product. Delete deletes it. So there's built-in ability now that any remote system, if it has the rights to do it, could do this create, read, update, delete kind of functionality to your product table. And so if you want to be able to publish this if you're going to, like, for example, you want to be able to make your products available to another system to be able to display them. And just in this internet world, you can say, okay, I have this API endpoint. You work through the security on that, but they would be able to read and put your products on their website. Probably you could use this. This is kind of the one-by-one functionality, but then there's this products get using the plural. And you can, when you use this API endpoint, it returns all of the products, or with perhaps some limitations. So we'll run the test on this, and you can see that if we say get response from row limit is required. So it gives us an error message. In the one that's automatically generated, you have to tell it the maximum number of rows that you're willing to accept back. So I give it a number here, and then it returns JSON back to us. I'm going to try and highlight this JSON and copy it so that we can just get a look at it. I have a favorite, Code Beautify. Provides a nice JSON formatter, and I'm going to use that, but any JSON formatter will do. I'll paste that in here. So while it shows all in one line to start with, we can get a look at it, and it's nicely formatted. So it's showing us that we have an entity of products, and then within that, an array. This thing means an array of individual products. So there's the first one in a group, there's the second one in a group. And so anybody that has the right now to call this API can get this list of products. Okay, so that's kind of built-in capability. If we were to edit the API endpoint, and this was given to us, produced by the entity builder, it's something that is editable if you want to. We recommend, again, that you make a copy instead of editing the ones that we produce automatically. But it comes with an input parameter of the row limit. It uses the read all mechanism that I was discussing a little while ago. So it associates the row limit, whatever. If you say you only want one record on the row limit, then that's the mess you'll get back. It's going to create something called products, and then in the raw response, we return the products as products JSON. So this is the thing that actually produces that output you saw a minute ago. So this sometimes it's useful to have a copy for a couple of different reasons. This default one might not ask the questions that you want to ask. And so that's what we're going to do today. First, we'll just make a copy of this, and we can use that here, clone the endpoint. And I'm just going to call this my products. It doesn't matter what you call it. It should be something meaningful to you, but you're going to this is the name that you'll use when you want to return products. And the few different things that I'm going to do differently, I don't want to have a row limit. I don't want to have to tell it how many I want. I just going to want to get all of them. So when I do read all products, instead of doing a row limit, I'm going to say that I want many products, all the products. Assuming that I have less than 999, it's still going to output the products. And so, but the other thing that we're going to want to do is to change, there's a security section down here. And I want to, the idea is that I want any website, your website, to be able to list my products on it. So I'm going to make this the lowest security level possible. This API is now available to the public without limitation. So there are other security settings, and you should dig into those if you need to provide an API endpoint that is more secure. But this is a public. We're going to make this one public. We'll save it and test it. Well, I managed to bump into a undocumented feature. Let's see if I can. Patrick, if you would make a note that we have a problem in that area, if you're cloning an endpoint and changing its name, saving multiple copies instead of only saving one. So I had to delete one. The best practice there to avoid our bug is that when you clone an endpoint, you change its name, save it immediately so that and then close it so that it's the only one there and ready to work with. Okay, so we can now save and test it. When you do an endpoint, well, we can test it. Nope, it didn't. My products, I think I'm just going to do this the right way because it's just a little bit flaky. And so I'm just going to demonstrate how it should have been done. So we'll delete it out. We'll start over. Products, we clone it. We say we want it to be my products. And then immediately save the item. So now it's in a healthy state. My products. We edit the endpoint. We'll do the few changes that we intended here. So we're not going to have a row limit, and we'll take that off. And otherwise, it's ready to go. So now when it no longer asks for input data, we get a response. We get all the products back. There's only 2 of them. And one of the things to note then is that the sample code is provided for you. So the code that you would need to call this API is here. This is what you would provide to whomever might be calling, that you want to allow to call your product. So if you were to go into a browser window and paste that URL, since it's a get can be accessed. That's what I forgot to do. Patrick, you didn't stop me. I did. Right. I forgot to deal with the security. So we would need to make it public and public access. And now we'll save it and try again. So when you get the error, current domain is not allowed, you need to look at the security section. Now we refresh again, we get all this data back, and it's the same that we had here before. And so we have our data back. Great. So you can, when you're looking at an endpoint and looking at the test section, that's where you can get. So we've got some Ajax code that you can use if you need to get it. If somebody were going to be recalling it that way, if you're using, for example, our server request, you just need the URL. Okay, so with all that setup done, we can now get on to what we were really trying to do today anyway, which was being able to retrieve data from an API endpoint. We now have an endpoint that we can use to test. So the first one that we're going to do is how do we use this as a listing? So we'll create a page, and I'm going to go to pages and create a page. This will be the API endpoint test page, and we're going to make it available to everyone. And just our admin type users are going to be able to edit the page. So that now if we go to preview our site, we have this API endpoint test page, and I'm going to click into it. So we have an empty page we can do things with. And so the first thing the idea is I want to be able to provide a listing that's based on an API, right? If we were to add a module and and add an action grid module, which is our listing module, and place it on the page. The classic way to get the information back would be to go to the settings screen and to choose products as a data source. It would pull it from the database, and so I'll run through configuring it that way. We'll say add fields, and we'll add the title and the description and maybe the ID if I can spot it here. So add those fields, save it. This is setting it up to automatically retrieve it from the entity. So that's only going to work if it's on the same system as where the data is. And so we see our title, our description, our ID. I'm going to clean up a couple of things though. This page got created with in Bootstrap 3 as the default. And so when you see that error that was just showing there, it's saying you need to be consistent. We need to provide this as a Bootstrap 5 page. So we'll save that and try again. So we'll refresh. And now we see our errors go away and it formats very nicely. Got this extra thing I don't care about that DNN drops in here for me, so I'm going to delete it, this HTML section. Okay, so we've demonstrated kind of the classic way of retrieving data out of an entity. But say you're trying to get data from some other system, not the system where you're working. I'm going to delete this one out, and just to kind of illustrate how to do it from scratch. So we will drop another action grid onto the page, and we'll configure it by retrieving data by JSON. So we'll go to settings and say that we're going to do server request JSON. It's going to request the data from some server someplace. It's going to happen to be ours, but it could be from anywhere, and retrieve it. So we need to know the URL where we're going to get the data from. And let's see, I was editing it here somewhere. Sorry, I'm clicking all around. All right, we'll go to our APIs and we'll look it up. So again, if you go into this test this endpoint section, it's going to give you the URL that you need. And so let's see if I can highlight it. And it is a get. So that's the operation that we're going to use. So we say, we give it the URL. We say that we're going to do a get. The request body would be an opportunity for you to provide parameters back to the API when you call it, so that it would know what it's doing. We're not going to provide any parameters. That particular API doesn't expect any. It's just giving us everything now. And then it needs an ID property. Now, JSON is a little bit different, and this driver actually requires you to use the same punctuation as in other words, the same case. So we have ID as a field. This is the thing that's unique about every product. They will all have their own ID. So we'll say ID, and then the base name. This is what we're going to call it when we display it. And I'm just going to put a P for product. It doesn't matter. It's just something that we need to use to call it. So whatever we want, we can call it anything we want. Next one, very important, path inside JSON. When we look at this JSON, these products are inside of an entity called products. And so we need this, again, keeping the punctuation, so I'm going to copy and paste. But the path that we were going to use is products. So that's going to tell it to go to the array that's located underneath products and retrieve the data. So with luck, we can save this source. And I always like to give it names. So this is going to be products by server request. And so you can see it's a server request JSON. We're going to add fields and see how everything is prefixed with a P. That's the P that we put in there a little while ago. So we can get the ID, the title, the description, whatever we need out of here, add those, and we should be good to go. So we'll save these again and go back. So now we have the same information, but behind the scenes, this is getting the data by an API call, server request to our own server. If you had multiple apps from Plant and App, you could create an endpoint in one place, consume the data in a different place, just by using the API to get the other one. And in the same way, it has the ability to use those other methods to post updates to it or delete whatever you need to do. So that's getting data by a server request. And I'm going to pause here for just a second, see if there's any questions along the way. Please type them in. I didn't encourage you, but you can use the chat to do that. So then the next area, and I'm going to clean things up here a little bit so that I don't get confused where I am. So we have our configuration page and our preview page, and then this is where we were. So what we're trying to do, the next thing we can do is to use it as an item data source. You can use, there's two different ways to do it, as a server request or as a request on a, you can use the API on the same system that you're on if it's an API on the Plant and App system. Let's stick with doing it as a server request. So the scenario, for example, is that we want to provide a form where somebody can pick what item they want to buy. And so that's going to be some form of a drop-down, a selection, a single selection. And when they pick that they want to buy item 1, then we're going to record a 1. If they want a women's sweatshirt, then it'll be item 2. But we don't need this anymore. This is just an illustration, so we'll clean that out and start a form. So we'll drop an action form onto the page. Start from a blank screen. And we will add a field. The field that we want to add is a single choice field like a drop down. Drop downs and some other fields have the ability to retrieve items from a number of places. So there's data sources where you can type them in, and that's the items. You can run a SQL query, you can get them from a variety of places, but we want to do it from a server request. Server request JSON, the same thing that we configured a minute ago for the listing. So we're going to need the same URL, and I'm going to find this on my Windows clipboard. Here it is here. We're going to use a get method. Again, we don't have any parameters, so we don't have to pass anything in. So now with this particular tool, this field type of drop down, it's going to let you pick a value from a list. So there's the what are people going to see, and then what's the value that it's going to use. So the text property that we want is the title. And I'm going to copy that again. This might be case sensitive. I think it is. So we're going to get title, and the value property is the ID. So when they pick it by title, they'll see title, but we're going to get ID. The path property is the same as we did before, that it is the products. Because the IDs, the individual products, are again inside of the products entity. So we need to get beyond that path. Nope. Path property. I was incorrect. This is the path inside JSON that we needed. So it's we're not using path. That's something entirely different. We need the path inside JSON so that it's getting below that products level, and that's it. So when we save this, and again, this is can go back and take a look at it, see what we have working with. So we have a drop down here. We click the drop down, we see men's sweatshirt, women's sweatshirt. So it's gotten the title for us. And then let's add a button so that we can actually see the value that's getting returned. So we'll add a button, and this would be, we'll add an action that is going to be, sometimes I just use a display error message to show things, and we can just append all fields. And so the drop downs value is going to, it got the name of the field, which we didn't provide any name. So just called showing the drop down name and the drop down value. So we'll save that and refresh. And so now when we pick sweatshirt men, we get a 1. We pick sweatshirt, women's sweatshirt, and we get a 2. So we got a value back. All right, so we have a question. JSON server instead of SQL. So yeah, so if your data is on the current system, is there an advantage to calling it via JSON instead of SQL? The simple answer is no, probably not. If you're on the same system and you use a SQL query to get your data, you can populate it easily that way, and it doesn't. It's probably faster and more efficient to use the SQL. if you were to use, if it needs some advanced formatting, and just have to determine, I mean, sometimes within SQL you can use you can do a great deal of formatting to retrieve and enhance the data. So again, SQL could very well be used for that. But if the scenario is that you're providing the product data both for your site and for some other site, it might be convenient to have it all be through the same endpoint, so that you don't have you're not maintaining two different ways to get the same information. Also, an API, I mean, we did a very simple API endpoint that just returned the data raw, but you could enhance or manipulate the data along the way, and that could be done within the API. And so your scenario it could be, but for the simple answer is most of the time you'll just using SQL or using the entity itself would be a better answer. Patrick, did you?
No, that's what I was going to say, is just to keep in mind that you have, you can have an entire list of actions behind that that data source.
Yes.
So it's basically what you said. I just wanted, that's
Yep.
all.
And in addition to that, there you could so there's the idea that the API could format the data differently, and there are lots of actions. Another thing is it could run a workflow that would do the work. So now you might have more complex your scenario is, and you've got this standard way of retrieving data. Perhaps the workflow is going to do all the work for you in its design. So again, you don't have a separate two different mechanisms doing the same thing. When you can do extra actions, there's other you can do other things. So for example, in the SQL, if you were to use SQL as the source for a listing, you're going to get the data, and it's just going to do the query and get the data. If you use an API for it, it could retrieve the data and get it for you, but it might also write to a log to say that such and such a user requested such and such a data. So you might have audit logging or charging for data or whatever your scenario is. So there's reasons why you might use it as an API, but it's in a simple scenario, SQL is probably better and faster. So I hope that's useful. All right, good question. Good. So we've demonstrated this scenario here, using it as a server request. There's another item that we provide that keeps it local. So I am going to, again, we can keep the same form, but we'll manage this form. Let's see. I often open the form in a new tab so I can have both the form and its design up on tabs. So we have this dropdown. We've done a dropdown that retrieves it based on an API call. I'm going to do another field type. Let's do that. Again, there's a number of field types that do data sources. I'm going to do a multiple choice. What do we do? We'll do a drop down with checkboxes just for fun. So, but it's got the spot for a data source, and we could do a server request JSON, but there is another one built in, the API endpoint methods. So if the API endpoint is on your system and you want to call that directly, you can do it that way. You've got a couple extra different questions to answer now. Instead of a URL, you have to pick the API endpoint module, which there's usually supposed to be only one if you're running a normal configuration of Plant and App. The API method that we want to run they're all there in a drop-down, so you can just pick it. We want to run the my products get. It is a get. and
you don't have any parameters for this for the endpoint you selected.
right. Yeah. Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So if the endpoint accepted parameters, this would be the place that you would choose those, but there aren't any in this one.
And I think if you go back and just click on new parameter again, I think it's worth pointing out that you don't have to know them. They'll be in that drop down right there. So if there are parameters for the method that you choose, they'll be listed there.
Right. So for example, I took out row limit, but if row limit were left in, it would say row limit here, and you could provide a value of 1 or 100 or whatever you needed. Good. So the text property, again, that we want is the title. The value property is the ID. Path inside JSON is the same. It's products, so the same as what we're doing earlier. And so this should work out about the same. I'm going to go to our value, to our button here where we're displaying the values, and do the quick version of this, just say append all fields now. And so I erased everything and put append all fields. So we have the drop down and the drop down with checkboxes. Not being very original in my naming today, but okay. So now our drop down, this one was the one that works with server request, that's still there, but now we have a drop down with checkboxes. And so same information in a slightly different format. And there's select all and clear all choices. When we submit, we see this one has the values of 1, 2 because it's getting the value. I picked both of them. If I say that I only want the women's shirt, for example, and submit again, we just get a 2. So this, depending on your need, it's a different type of tool. But the thing that we're illustrating is you can use that that API directly. Patrick, do you happen to know, does that avoid making a call to the, does it call the API internally, or does it still make a call to the API?
Yeah, I believe that's calling it internally.
Right, so there might be a little bit more efficient to use that one if you're on the same system. Otherwise, you call the API with the server request. Okay. So that's the primary objective that I wanted to show, being able to consume these API endpoints in a variety of ways. And once you have an API endpoint, you can retrieve it on other of your systems, on other systems that are non-Plantain app, if they have the ability to retrieve a data from an API, then we're showing you the syntax to get that done. So that's again, the primary thing I wanted to show today. And so now I'm going to kind of go on to some optional extras with our last 10 minutes. If we look at our entities and products, this is where we can maybe we can demonstrate. Yeah, let's do a little bit of filtering. So if I were to edit this same one that we were looking at and the properties, in addition, maybe we put, we have cost already. We can, I'm going to go with color. So we're going to do color and add it to the properties of this entity. And so we'll provide some color and the ability for you to pick things based on a color. So if we return to our products, we now have a spot to put in color. So we'll say the men's shirt is blue and the women's shirt is red. And we'll add one more thing. Just so we can see how this selection works. So the idea is you want an endpoint that does some selection based on color. And so we'll go ahead and take care of that. We're still going to do that. I mean, you might have a separate endpoint that is the products by color. We're going to just keep with our the endpoint that we've created and add some capacity to it. So we edit our endpoint. We add an input parameter called color. So if they provide a color, it's going to provide it's going to collect a text characteristic called color, and used for filtering the data. And so now how do we use color? Well, in our read all products, there is a where clause that we can just add color equal to the input parameter. So this is the field name. Sorry, highlighting here. This is the in our SQL syntax or data retrieval, the property that we're checking on is called color, and we want to see whether or not it equals to the value of whatever was provided. So it's possible that they're not going to provide anything, and that's going to be a blank. So when if they don't provide a color, it's going to return nothing. Let's test out that theory. So when we do the interactive test, we've got a color parameter now. If we hit get response, we get nothing. We get an empty array of products. If we say red, we get the women's shirt. If we say blue, we get the men's sweatshirt and also the jeans. So this thing now requires an input, and so I mean, we've changed this definition. Any place that it's used, since we used the same one, now has to be updated. So in our API endpoint test, see, we're getting nothing now because it requires an input. So we can go ahead and edit our form. And in both of these cases, we can request something. So in our get, the one that we're doing by a call, we can say color. We can provide the value color equal red. And just for fun, we'll go down to this other one where we're calling it by the API endpoint method. And as Patrick pointed out earlier, it now has color as the input field, and we'll do this one blue. So we're going to have different things in our dropdowns now. So we'll save, refresh. And so this dropdown only has the women's sweatshirt. This one has the sweatshirt and the jeans. But so it just kind of starts to show the possibility of adding logic, even filtering logic, but it could be more advanced logic. Could ask for things like user or security, or whether or not you want to log or reserve an item, things like that. So lots of different capability there. Okay. So that's we'll call it there. That's APIs as a data source, how you can consume them, how you create them, reasons why you might use an API over using a that was funny, right? This is my marker for I didn't fill in anything on the slide. It's not a rating of our material. So with that, we'll say happy low coding. We are, as mentioned will not be meeting next week, but we will be meeting 2 weeks from now, and we hope to see you then. Thank you much.